most of those items were voted on at that meeting. So the purpose, the membership eligibility, things like that were voted on there. At that point, the general membership decided to allow the committee to continue our work to focus more specifically on the actual bylaws. And so what we did there was, again, taking some direction from some other similar communities. Several of our members went out and basically created their own version of the bylaws by downloading and curating and basically taking some example from those other communities. We then decided as our committee which one we were going to use as our working draft. And so from that point on, we met 6 or 7 times, something like that, and basically hashed through line by line everything you see in these bylaws. We took every item that we discussed, is this kind of what we envisioned for our community council, and does that work for us? And so at that point, a couple of weeks ago, we decided we feel like this is pretty good when we go and sit down and start getting some feedback from the community, and that's what we did. So we appreciate everybody being here tonight. We have just a couple of things that we're going to go over quickly, some specific items and kind of how we got to where we did, where we kind of developed a consensus, and then of course we're going to open it up for your input. So if you want to move to, what we're going to do, because we kind of want to keep things moving, is we're going to kind of go like one amendment at a time, and we're going to open it up for comment and discussion on that item. We ask that you keep your questions or comments kind of brief, if you would, to give everybody an opportunity to go around and give their input. And once we move on from that amendment, we'll roll to the next, and we'll kind of take it from there. So where do we start?
The overview of the process will be to meet with you tonight and go through the amendments one by one. After that, we will go back into our group, make sure that they align and all the verbiage is inclusive and correct. And then we will take it to a legal review. Unless there are big objections or big changes tonight, if that occurs, then we may need to come back into a large group again. So at the end of tonight, we'll know which direction we're going in.
Excuse me, can you guys just say who you are? Because we don't all know who you are.
Introduce ourselves.
Well, when you're talking at least.
Oh, sure.
And then if we have already emailed you recommendations, do we need to stand up and say those things or not?
You're free, either way you want to go.
Okay, but you don't need to hear it then.
Not necessarily. We haven't reviewed everything completely as a committee, so if you'd like to do that,
Okay.
you're certainly welcome to. We're gonna compile all those emails and bring it in.
Yeah.
We kind of have to.
So, thank you.
So this is not some kind of really strict forum. This is basically for, like I said, we've sent out our communication outward into the community. What we've done, what we've worked on, you've seen the copy of the bylaws. This is for you to offer your input back to us. Kind of keep it, we'll open for that. All right. So as far as membership eligibility, that was agreed upon at the last meeting. We took a majority vote on that. It was basically one registered voter, one vote. So as many people, it's not one per household, something like that. It's if you're registered in Bear Creek to vote, then you get one vote. As far as the council is concerned, we're basically adopting the same sort of idea as far as what the boundaries are, just to keep everything, like I said, very, very consistent. We are asking for people to bring their voter ID just to show that you're eligible. You show your Bear Creek voter ID, you get a ballot, you get a vote. Again, just trying to keep things as simple as possible. We intend, at least initially, to hold meetings monthly. We think things will probably move along a little bit better if we're kind of keeping up the momentum. That's been a big part of this, not only basic agenda structure there. Again, a lot of these things are just things we pull from other similar communities. We didn't necessarily want to try to reinvent the wheel. A lot of this is take a lot of good ideas and compile them together and use them for our own purposes. So, as I'm going down, again, just feel free to raise your hand if you have a comment or question on one specific amendment. We'll stop and allow some time for discussion there. If there's no issue or no comment or question, we'll just continue to kind of work our way down. And all of the members here all the committee members here are volunteers who offer to come sit up here and answer your questions and address any of your concerns. So I'm going to allow them, encourage them to jump in if there's something specifically that they want to touch on. As far as the board structure, we are recommending a 7-member board. We feel like that's a good number for what we're trying to do. Basically, so the board structure, what we discussed, and we've gotten some feedback via email. I'm curious what people have to contribute on this specific one. Is that basically we would vote in 7 people, and then that board amongst themselves would decide who's going to be in any of these individual serving each of those roles. We felt like that's kind of common for other boards and other groups, and so we adopted that. To sort of go along that same line. I don't feel the need to necessarily read the bylaws all the way through. You've all got copies of them. You can kind of see what we're doing here. Just kind of touch on a few of the specifics that we, as a committee, had important discussion on.
What we envision after tonight is to go back and rework these bylaws. When we come up with a final copy of the bylaws, a final version, we'll bring it back to the community to vote on. If those bylaws are adopted by the community that night, then we will hold an election. And the community that night will vote on 7 members. At that point, they will organize themselves and we will step back and let the new members organize themselves. Most of us are willing to be available and have them board as they organize and go forward.
What is the role of the sergeant at arms?
The question was, what is the role of the sergeant at arms?
Your page on the next page.
Page 4.
Section 6,
Oh, thank you.
page 4.
Maintain basically Robert's rules of order. That's kind of what we've adopted as our guidance. There was some discussion of parliamentarian versus sergeant at arms. I think there is some difference technically in those roles. That was the basics of how we came up with that.
We've organized this We're envisioning that the board members, all 7 will be elected the first year. Some will have 2-year terms, some will have 1-year term. The next year, half of those members will be voted for 2-year terms. So the board will have some continuity going on with everybody after the first cycle having a 2-year term. And after the first year, as people step off the board, then they'll most likely, and this will be a decision for your new board, the members will be voted in for each position, not 7 overall. The 7 overall is the initial board.
When the first 7, they choose their responsibilities. So when the next half is voted on the next year, and those new people come in, are they going to decide who is the chairman at the end? Or is the chairman, say the chairman's there for that next term also, the 2 years? Is the 7 going to vote on each individual's duty every time, every year? So like, you know what I'm saying? Huh?
He's asking if there's terms or the office.
So would the chairman stay as the chairman throughout his term, or when the new 4 is elected, or 5, are they all re-voting on it?
So it was our intent that every year annually, those positions would be re-elected amongst the new board members that are coming.
We don't anticipate issues, but board members can be removed for cause. They can also resign on their own. And listed on the page 5 of the Community Council bylaws, number 8, is what a board member can be removed for cause. They would be removed by a 2/3 vote of other board members, not by the general membership. It's not a popularity contest. It has to be for a reason.
I would recommend that you clarify that the remaining members as board members. When I first read it, I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I read it again and realized the intent is board members in that. But if you could just put removal requires 2/3 vote of the remaining board members.
So, sure. So the recommendation was to just make sure that we're clarifying that remaining members refers to the board members.
Correct.
Thank you.
Which line item is that?
That's number 8. All remaining calls. All right. Decision making and voting. Just briefly, because I think that is a fairly important part of the bylaws. Quorum for conducting business shall consist of a total of 15 general members, including a minimum of 3 officers, which must include a chair or vice chair. Decisions will be made by a simple majority of all members present. Voting will occur in person with no proxy voting, only 1 vote per member.
We did struggle with this decision
Yeah, so the question I believe was as far as meetings, we're trying to stream the meetings, kind of like we are tonight, you can't be there, but the voting would be allowed. And I think our consensus was we did not want to get into trying to do voting other than on a paper ballot that you need to be present.
Okay.
That is me.
No proxies, no talk.
There are some guidelines as far as with nonprofit requirements, and that you can't vote by electronic, by text, you have to be able to vote, I can't remember the word, but everybody has to be able to exchange in real time their input. So legally, to keep us moving forward as a nonprofit, we probably would abide to that rule, so at this point, we had talked about only doing paper ballots.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other comment or discussion on decision making and voting?
We anticipate that this organization will be a central hub both for information and for input to the borough, to the city. And in order to facilitate that, we're looking at committees. So we want to have as much input from the community as possible and as much involvement as possible. In addition to committees and standing committees appointed by the organization, we want to have liaisons reach out to different community organizations and bring back monthly reports so that there's one central hub for information. It's very difficult right now for anybody to find out anything in one central place. And that's what we're hoping. One of the main things that we can do with this organization will be
So, one of the other really big sort of, one of the items that took a lot of time, and we had a lot of back and forth and discussion on, over multiple meetings was how do we change the bylaws, what is required in order to make that happen. We understand that there may be things, you know, obviously this is not a perfect document yet. We did our best to make it something that will reflect what the general consensus was. So we want to have a process for change, but we also don't want to create something that 6 months from now looks nothing like what we all agreed to and what this committee spent several months creating, producing. So we want it to be possible to change, but not easy to change. And so this amendment, Article 10, amendments to the bylaws, kind of reflects what we thought would be doable if it was completely necessary to change bylaws, but not something that could just be done month after month, meeting after meeting, where the meetings then get inundated with changes to the bylaws and changes to the point where the community just doesn't really see the purpose of having the bylaws or maybe even having the council. So that's what we kind of came to.
So we have a 3-step process. It says a 3-month process, but that's not exactly how it will work. The first month, the amendment would be presented to the board and then to the membership. That gives a month for the bylaw change to be absorbed by the community, to be well advertised, and let everybody in the community see what the change is going to be. So the second month, they would come back and discuss it. And at that point, if the community wants to go forward with the bylaw change, it would need to undergo a legal review to make sure it continues and the organization continues to comply with nonprofit rules. And then at the third month, when we come back, then the community would vote on it. We did not want the bylaw changes to be easy, so we wanted the bar to be higher, of 40 members present to vote, and a 2/3 majority of those 40 members to change the bylaws.
Yeah, this is jumping back to the Article 8. Form for conducting business shall consist of a total of 15 general members, including a minimum of 3 officers, which must include the chair and vice chair. Just feels like you need to have at least the majority of the officers there, so I would think that maybe that number should be increased to 4, instead of 3, which would be less than the majority of the officers.
So the comment was about in Article 8, decision-making and voting quorum for conducting business shall consist of a total of 15 general members, including a minimum of 3 officers, which must include the chair, vice chair, and the suggestion was to increase the number of officers from 3 to 4, which would then basically represent a majority of 4 out of 7. Needing to be present to have that. Any other discussion on the amendment process, basically, how do we change bylaws?
When you get the attorney review, you may want to ask other boards that I've been on require, I think they have required at least the annual review of the bylaws, which the board could do on their own. And, if they thought that there needed to be a change, then they might recommend it to the group. And then otherwise, you have this for the group to have an avenue to make a change. So Article X could say review and amend the bylaws with just a little paragraph like the board will, or the executive board, whatever you want to call yourselves, or not yourselves, but whatever they are, would do an annual review of the bylaws. So I'm not sure if it's required by a nonprofit or not, but I know the boards I've been on, they all tend to do that.
Can I ask you to just come forward and repeat that? Because there's a lot of information there that I think was very helpful, but I don't want to try to, yeah,
You want me to?
absolutely, yeah.
Who are you?
Okay, Article 10, what I was saying was it could be changed to say review and amend the bylaws, because the boards I've been on usually require an annual review of the bylaws by the board. And then they can say in the minutes that they reviewed it, but also continue on with the rest of it so that the membership can decide if they want to make a change to the board at any time. That was all. Does that make sense? So at an annual meeting, or whenever it is, the bylaws would say at the annual meeting, or at least once a year, the board would review the bylaws. Just plain and simple. It should be, yes. Right, so add that to Article 10, review and amendment of bylaws. So add that little piece to it. And then, so you would say A, and then B would be this part. That's all. Right?
Yeah, well, we need an admin ability to track the bylaws through the system, right? So when the secretary receives the proposal, she'll assign a number to it, 001, 326, whatever. However, that would start a paper trail going through the process each month, each meeting, right? And then, once the bylaw is approved, it'll probably be put into an appendix in the back of the bylaws that are all the minutes over the year. And before the first date on the annual meeting next year, these bylaws be rewritten, all the minutes put into the bylaws. Fresh set of bylaws for the first, each annual meeting.
Can I just throw something in here? I like my suggestion to read the bylaws periodically. I would put that clause in there as a responsibility of the board and not necessarily associated with amending bylaws. Because we don't want to set it up so that the suggestion is every year the board should be thinking about amending the bylaws. But it is important for the board to be reading the bylaws every year. Otherwise, it just turns into a document that's shoved into a drawer somewhere, and pretty soon everyone's forgotten about it until someone ideally, once this is in place and it's traveled around for a couple of years and a few amendments have been put on it, hopefully this is a document that can be simple and straightforward enough that it doesn't have to be amended every year.
I suggest we can read bylaws, and that would be at the annual meeting, they would be,
Yeah, or put it,
or at the board meeting prior to the annual meeting.
I'd put it somewhere in there as a responsibility on the part of the board, but I wouldn't associate it directly with the amendments, outlined for how you amended it. Because that sort of implies that we're supposed to amend it every year.
So the intention, I'm Jennifer Peterson, the intention you're suggesting is just for an annual review. Okay.
Maybe after the election.
After the election.
So that the new board members and everybody has that refresh.
Got it. Thank you.
You're definitely gonna run into situations your first few years as a council to where you're gonna wanna review them and say, hey, this is the problems we're running, bring it to our attention and go, this is some of the things that we may wanna look at changing. So an annual review of yourself going, hey, this is what we've been seeing from the public, this is a roadblock, and we put it there on accident, and we need to change it. But yeah, after an election, everybody gets on the page, reads it. But these first few years, you guys are really gonna wanna look at it, and especially with what we got going on. I'm for it.
I think we have a couple of notes on that as far as reviewing every year, and before and or after, annual meeting and the election.
Yeah, because we're not gonna understand your side, the board side every time, and then the laws, whereas you guys are, and your guys are gonna see things that are in here that we want to get something accomplished, let's say, but we're held by this. And so the first few years, you guys reviewing that, you're gonna go, okay, we were a little too aggressive, or maybe not aggressive enough, we need to change this and bring it to our attention.
So perhaps one of the first things that committees that is formed is a bylaw review committee that does that on an annual basis.
Did I just hear you say that, you would do a bylaw review by quorum? Well, I'm just asking if what I heard, did she just say that they would do, at the meeting, they would do a bylaw review by quorum?
I don't think we got the specifics of quorum, I think it was
Okay,
just
I
a
thought I
suggestion to
heard the
review.
word, I thought I heard the word quorum in there, and my thing is, that should not be a quorum thing if you're changing bylaws. That should be a mandate, everybody on the board.
Oh, I see what you mean. You want the whole board present, not necessarily just a
You-
committee.
The more you dilute it, the more crazy it's gonna get down the road. That's just life. In my experience, and
Which is why we set the bar higher for a bylaw change to 40 members and 2/3.
well, I'm not talking about the change, I'm talking about the review.
I did say that we should have a committee by perhaps. the
Maybe that's what maybe it was committee instead of quorum, but
And then.
as a board, I don't know, I just would see, if I was on the board, if I didn't review that every year, and you guys, the other people there, met the quorum, I would say, wait a minute, why am I even here if it's not mandated that I review this, as opposed to a quorum? That's my,
Right, now the idea would be that a committee would be reviewing them and then bring their recommendations to the board and to the community. Not that a small group of people would change it, but that sometimes a small group of eyes can track things better. That's all.
But everybody can set up.
I guess to go back at that to me is suggesting, if we've got a committee whose job is to review it and bring recommendations to the board, that is building a suggestion and say, okay, we're the board, let's do a page turn on this and make sure we understand what this document is. So that as we go forward with all the meetings through the year, the board members all understand what the bylaws are that they're supposed to be working with.
Also, the idea of a committee is that as many people in the community that wanted to be involved in this process would be. It would not be just a small group. It would be a community-wide involvement.
But it's not a process, it's, hey, let's make sure the board remembers what this document is every year.
The board has to follow the bylaws,
Right, so they should.
or they could be disbanded by being a nonprofit. They're bound by bylaws.
My name is Paul. So my understanding of this, and this is what was in my writing, Moses, do you want the board itself in its entirety to review, nothing else, correct?
Well, I was talking, the board needs to review,
The board, not the committee.
not a committee, because as he said, a committee, it makes it sound like, okay, every year we're gonna change this.
Right, I get that. We just need to clarify, I know a couple of the brains here are on the same page, and we want the board itself to review the bylaws.
And I guess I'm looking at it, the reason I brought up quorum is because you as the board, okay, maybe you can't get together every month, but once a year?
So no, that's why I said the board in its entirety needs to review it again.
Just review. You may sit down and look at that and say, okay, we haven't heard anything from anybody, we don't see anything wrong here, we're good with it. You put that out, and I didn't mention this earlier, but you really need to document this well. That you reviewed, and if you do have suggestions for change, document that. Because then we, as the members, can look at that and say, yeah, I think we should get together and talk about this. Or we can say, hey, you guys are good, let's go to the next thing.
All right, thank you for your inputs. And I made some notes, so the next time we do this, we'll put them in actions.
I need your name, sir, because I'm gonna nominate you for the,
I just thought of that.
so be careful if you, have any really strong suggestions for deep notes here, who's gonna be able to work.
My name is Rick Spires. And the only thing, I will not, under any circumstances, I'll move out of the state if you want to nominate me as secretary.
That would be a few other things board members.
Sure, that's good, guys. So, moving down to financial management, this is, maybe some suggestions on EINs and things to set up, bank accounts, like I use it, some of our nonprofit needs.
This is way out of my wheelhouse, but there are certain rules and laws that nonprofits have to follow for financial management, and we definitely want to make sure that they're all followed accurately. So the council will maintain one or more board bank accounts. We want them to comply with all federal, state laws, and we want two parties for signature on every check. No expenditures, and this is something that we will probably need to add on, no expenditures shall be approved unless they're pre-approved by the board. So people can't just spend money unless the board approves it. One of the things that we're looking at is trying to fund an organization and a startup. We're looking at legal review, filing fees, a number of things donation-based.
Yes.
You mentioned like expenditures to be chosen by the board, but you didn't say how, like, is it 100% vote has to, for the expenditure, is it 2/3? Like, I didn't see that in there, but you mentioned like it would be chosen by the board.
So the question was decisions about expenditures by the board. We use a similar forum to other issues, other decisions.
So they can't endeavor the organization.
Right,
So they have to have the money first before they can spend it.
right. But my question is when you do that, how are you deciding that you're doing that? Is it
By
your
community
vote?
input.
Hmm?
The whole.
No. So with your team.
Yeah, there are like 8 decision in order.
Oh, right.
That's probably the way that it is. The smoothest way of financing, that's probably the smoothest way to put it.
So I was curious, so we have to have a legal review for the bylaws. How do you get that done with no funds? Are you looking for a pro bono attorney to do it? Like, I just wasn't sure. With absence of funds, how do you get that legal review step?
So, now you're talking about, so that was unfortunately my task. Deal with attorneys, and I couldn't find a pro bono attorney that would do anything for free. So yeah, we have to have legal review with this. So how we're gonna raise the money, we don't even know what it's gonna cost yet. It's gonna cost several $1,000 probably. But that's not even the worst part. The worst is the indemnification, which we'll go into later, what that's gonna cost us.
So I'm Karen Wright, and I've been in contact with the Foreign Group, just getting some information about them. They can help us out a lot. If you guys don't know about the Foreign Group, it's basically a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits function in a smooth and effective way. So the Foreign Group can help us with our initial review of the bylaws, and then as we pursue nonprofit status, they can also help us with that. The rates are definitely going to be more affordable than if we just tried it out with some random lawyer. I think the highest rate was quoted to me as $260 an hour, which might sound like a lot, but for a lawyer, that's actually not too bad. So at least for like the initial review. So I guess I'm going to say both the rest of you guys. I don't know exactly where the funds are going to come from, so we don't have to really talk about that. But that's kind of just thinking about what this might cost initially. Anyways, it's going to be about $260 an hour.
I don't live in the Bear Creek area, but I am just wondering, could you not get hold of the borough and explain the situation? Because they do have the CAP funds and community development project, as well as improvements. And I'm just wondering if they could fund the startup.
And that was
They
my
want
first,
you.
that was my first call was to the borough, and I spoke to the borough attorney, and basically they told us that they couldn't help us. That's what I said.
Well, given the financial state of the borough,
So I guess I'm curious about, is the ultimate goal is 501c3 status correct, or 501c6? Do you guys have an idea of the differentiation there that you're going for? Of non-profit structures, or just, those are the two differentiations?
Question was 501c3 or
Or 501c6?
C6?
We would, a nonprofit under this organization would be considered a 501c4, I believe.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't know as much about those, but I was just planning on suggesting with this talk of finances and not putting the cart before the horse, but I would pencil in verbiage to the bylaws allowing, it's really customary for the secretary to be paid, as they do a lot of the administrative lift. On a board, they're the only allowed to be legally paid board member in the way that they keep meeting minutes, go out and do some of the bidding, such as Foraker reaching out, they can be an acting board member. That doesn't then just like limit you to pro bono work on behalf of, the elected board, as well as attorneys or other sort of legal specialties. So I would recommend when there are funds available, wherever they may come from.
Thank you for that. And that's really helpful because, again, a lot of what we've done is based off of our own individual experiences. And none of us are professionals. I've never been part of a committee that started something from square one. So that's a great question. Something we want to make a note for. She said that it's not uncommon for the secretary to actually be a paid position on the board versus all the other ones are unpaid. That might be the one because of the amount of administrative duties that they take on. They might have more hours, they probably have more hours outside of the board meetings and the general meetings than anybody else.
That's why I want to discuss this position.
Right, that was a discussion for that.
I've been on a lot of nonprofit boards, I've never had a paid secretary. They might have had a paid administrator when the organization gets mature enough to actually have a paid employee part-time, but I have not found that standard in any of the boards of served government.
You have an example
I've been one, yeah. I have, not in the state, but I'm a 501c6 in a different state. I was a paid secretary for a couple different boards. It's kind of the herder of cats. I hear you in that if you have an administrator or an executive director, that's obviously ideal, right? That is a fully functioning, autonomous role, one might say. But secretary is this nice kind of hybrid if you're in the flux of not having money. But yes, I've made money hourly as a secretary on a board.
Is it legal to do? From my research, if we have an all-volunteer organization, to have a paid position would not necessarily be a board position. The board is volunteer.
You can't pay profits.
Right.
You can't divvy up profits, that's the non-profit. You can totally pay your officers for the work that they do. 100% we pay our secretary, treasurer, and our non-profit right here in town. She's paid a monthly fee for the work that she does. What's that?
You know, you asked me the name of that.
For ILWU Unit 60, we're the longshoremen here in town. Our organization is a nonprofit. We have two. We have a benevolent as well as Unit 60. The secretaries and treasurers are paid positions because they do so much work. They have to not only take care of the books, but they're filing the LM3s at the end of the year. They're keeping track of all. They got a lot to do on a monthly basis. So they get paid. It's not a lot. You're not getting rich off of it. It's not gonna support you, but it's a little bit just because of all the work that you do. But you can pay every position for the work that they do. You just can't divvy the profits up to the membership. And that's what a nonprofit is. If that makes sense.
Basically, you have to come in and establish, what are we gonna pay that person? Let's just
You don't have to pay them either.
No, but I'm just saying,
But you can't.
but I'm just saying, if you do pay them, you have to come in and say, okay, we're gonna pay the secretary, and I'm just throwing a number out here. $10 an hour, as opposed to a profit would be, we're gonna pay the secretary $200 an hour. If you go in and establish this stuff, it can still meet nonprofit requirements. You just can't be out of the realm of what's reasonable when you talk about paying the officers. Because if it is a big nonprofit, it takes a lot of work. I mean, the secretary may have somebody working for him even, as well as the treasurer. I'm not saying that this is gonna be that big, but you can pay. It's not excluded in a nonprofit.
Well, and then we come back to funds, and we come back to a way to raise money for an organization that's
Well,
basically got
I was gonna ask something here, and this I have no knowledge about. But can, as a return on your investment from the membership. I don't know if that's possible. Because look, I do know this is what's going to happen. Grants don't come in easy, and they don't come in quick. It's that simple. I've worked with people that do grants, and grants can take any place from months to years, depending on how big the grant is and how complicated it is. But as you've stated, there needs to be some money here to just get started. So anyway, I don't know if it's legal. You would have to ask an attorney if it's legal to get a loan from your membership that's paid back when the grant comes in.
I think the one kind of running theme that we have heard is that grants typically are for specific projects. They're not necessarily to be used for the operating expenses of the organization. But that's a great point. I've got to agree.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there because I don't see a lot of money coming in quickly without something like that.
Right now, we probably don't need a paid secretary, but it would definitely be something to consider once we have adoption.
You may not need the paid secretary, but I don't know anybody that's going to want to do the treasury part without some kind of compensation, because they're going to have to go through a lot of stuff on that.
I think what we're talking about is having a separate third-party person who handles the actual books of the organization, the treasurer, somebody who might bring the financial report to the board meeting
And that's fine. But again, that's still going to be a paid thing.
Sure.
If you go to
exactly
part
that
of
would be an expense. It just might not be a board member.
Right.
Absolutely. Ron?
Did we not, did we get any information from these other groups that started up about how they started up financially? You know, all these bylaw research, were there any?
As far as all the raise money, I think some of the groups do have paid dues, correct? Which is certainly an option. We just kind of try to avoid making that our initial step one is to say, in order to be a voting member, you've got to pay $100 a year. I think we're trying to avoid that if possible. But yeah, there's no question about that. At a certain point, if we want to turn this into something that's an actual effective organization, there's going to be some expenses involved, whether it's paid employee or just just insurance and legal review.
So if I'm understanding this right, before this thing even stands up, we're gonna have to pay for a legal review, and then we haven't got there yet, but there's gonna be an issue of paying for some insurance for the board members. What dollar value are we on the hook for before we stand this thing up? Do we have any kind of idea there? And also, if someone made some flyers that sent out just for this meeting, who did that? And, you know, did they pay for that themselves, or?
Yeah, so those were just private donations that were made by residents of the community who wanted to make sure that if you weren't on Facebook or you didn't happen to walk past the bulletin board at the fire department or Safeway, there were 5 or 6 people, I think, that just contributed money to have those flyers made. Yeah, we're gonna go into the insurance part. Unfortunately, we don't have a exact number. We've got quotes for insurance from some other organizations or just some ballparks. They're thousands of dollars. I mean, they're $2,000 to $5,000. I think 5 to 10. So I mean, it's not
$5,000 to $10,000 a year?
Right.
And I just don't understand where this money's coming from. I mean, you're saying all this has to be paid up before we start this, before we get the checking accounts?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about whether there's really anything we can do before we have that in place. I think the long and short of it was, does anybody want to serve on a board that is going back and forth to different governmental entities, doing things that might handle money, that might change something to do with any kind of property taxes or the use of anybody's property, which of course, in all of this, we try to avoid doing anything that's going to affect anybody's individual liberties. But in this day and age, you just don't know what may happen. So in order for somebody to come serve on the board and try to be effective, we want to protect those people for any potential lawsuit that can come in the future. As far as how it gets paid for, that's a big part of the discussion. How do we raise that money?
I don't want to put water on that, but I don't think it's a matter of do we want to. I don't think you can do anything other than you have to have that out there. Because if you don't have it out there and one or all of you make a suggestion that for whatever reason is wrong, I mean legally wrong, because it's so deep in the book that you just didn't get to that, you're going to be on the hook for that. And I'm not saying anybody here or anybody in Bear Creek or anything would sue, but do you want to take that chance as an individual? I mean, I don't know where all you stand as far as businesses go. I'm retired, so I don't have that. But I sure wouldn't want to stand there and put my hard-earned money up for grabs because I made an honest mistake.
We do have a couple of hands of people who haven't spoken yet, so I just want to make sure that we're fair and we'll in the back there.
I just, I just want to say this real quick, because you guys keep saying, we're on the hook. We're not the board. It's going to be you guys out there that get on this committee, okay?
Well, the point being, right now, you are who we're talking to.
We're just volunteers that wrote this, right? It's going to be you guys that vote, and it might be you that's on that council, or you might be on that council, and you want to be on a council that doesn't indemnify you.
No.
In this day and age, you don't want to do that, right? So, that's where we're at.
I just want to mention that there's an identification in federal law. There's an actual act that gives protection to all volunteer organizations, charitable organizations. So, I would still want to have errors and omissions and all the other kind of insurance anyway, but there's federal law that covers some that to some extent. That's federal law is about enough. I can't remember.
So, just to repeat what Will said, there's already some federal law in place that probably will be something that will be discussed in the legal review process.
You should check it out.
Why we think that's almost 100%.
There's an all volunteer organization protection federal law.
Yeah, can we, I'm just a suggestion, to get us off the ground, there's so many of us that do want a council to go. Can we do an initial, donation thing from the public, you know, that want this to go, realizing that this first step, is there any reason we couldn't put out something where we could all pitch in? I mean, there's enough of us. Get something going. You know, just an initial one, hey, let's get this off the ground.
Yeah, what Nate's saying is do we have some kind of initial donation offering or whatever to get us to do what it is we need to do. And frankly, it's the elephant in the room. It's we got to come up with some money to do it somehow. So if anybody has some suggestions, we're trying to stay away from the whole idea of
too expensive if you find out, like you were saying, there might be an act, or there's also a group. So if we become Bear Creek Community, then there's probably a group where you can get the insurance less expensive. Yeah, there might be a group discount with this type of organization because there's several of them. So Anchorage has like 3 councils, and then we've got one at Old Point. So I'm never about reinventing the wheel. And then Seward Community Foundation, once you become a nonprofit, they will not fund fundraising, but if you say we need a laptop, and you tell them how much, and we need whatever, I mean, it's gotta be concrete stuff. So, there is the ability to get funding from the Seward Community Foundation. Amy has experience with that.
I'm curious about the other community councils. Are they 501c4s, like Chamber of Commerce, Rotary Club, they're C4s? Rather than a C3, the donations to a C4 are not tax deductible. But it's more common for more of those organizations than for like the community foundation or Rotary Club.
That is correct, but a 501c3 involves a lot more. It's a federal designation, not just a nonprofit. That is something that should probably be up to the planning board. We're trying to set this up now to start, to get them off the ground. If we were to take that rate to a 501c3, the expense would be a lot higher. Anybody else have questions?
I didn't have a question, I think Maya sort of covered it, and that's that people have been doing this, it's not, there are wheels out there, and so it seems to me that with all the research you did and with other entities, that there are some answers and ways to do it, so. It sounds sort of overwhelming, but maybe it's not so overwhelming.
Just to repeat, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to adopt what some other communities have done. Absolutely. Not everybody is necessarily exactly like us, but it's similar. There are examples here. Any other questions or comments? This has been very helpful. I think the bylaws committee will probably need at least one more time to take into consideration some of the things that have been discussed tonight. I want to quickly send this out for legal review. I think that probably is going to be something that we just kind of pass that and try to come up with the funds to cover. Our goal is, again, to get a board in place, and we've got some suggestions. We've got kind of a to-do list for that new board of things that we have accomplished yet, that we think the elected board should take the whole, take the reins and do that. So, looking forward to doing that. Anyone else?
Yeah, we did our review with everybody, but I'm assuming that if anyone has any questions further down, I just don't want us to walk out of here without having finished our review of the document. We just got to an identification before we wrap it up. Were there any other questions beyond where we're at?
What was you said advancement of expenses, is that where we're at?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Are we on number 3 up there? Down, there, number 3.
Yes, we didn't really go into the specifics on this identification. This is just some language that we, honestly, that we pulled from the internet just to have something to work from, something that was kind of general in its scope. And
this is the indemnification. I was looking, yeah, for expenses. I mean, I would hope you would define some of the expenses that you're talking about as far as that can be approved. I mean, I'm not saying anybody's gonna do anything wrong, but, you know the old saying, my fault, your fault, nobody's fault. If you don't define what the limitations are without having a vote, usually people, someday, sometime, somewhere, will say, oh, I think this meets that requirement. I mean, look at the entire U.S. government, how it's going right now.
I think that's something we need on the specifics of the nonprofit status and what that would allow.
Now, that was just on expenses. It's a very vague term you have in there on expenses.
Speaking of additional record, the advancement of expenses.
Hold on, I cannot quite read it off of here.
I think he was looking at that more in the general term as far as expenses for the organization, what the board is allowed to.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking more in the general thing.
Some organizations will front their members' money for initial lawyer fees before insurance kicks in. That is something that needs to be reworked and looked at really closely, because we may or may not be able to do that as a startup organization. It may be something that needs to happen down the road. I don't see personally indemnification, especially the first year when we're starting out, being a huge deal.
Well, I'm looking at the wrong place right now. What I was looking at is just expenses will be refunded as, required. It was in one of those sections.
Articling that and.
I mean, we might have gone by it, and if we did, I apologize for that. Right there.
And like I just said,
Reimbursements of reasonable authorized expenses.
this is more of a placeholder at this point than what we wanted to be able to come to the community with, because we haven't gotten the answers that
That is so broad right there. That's just, something to move forward.
If we're going back up to under financial management, the reimbursement of reasonable expenses, and we should probably spell that out a little bit more specifically.
I mean, we all know that.
I think to really sum that up would be as directed by the board, so we agree that we're going to send somebody to a meeting, wherever it might be, and we're going to pay for their travel expenses up to X dollars, and then, we're going to reimburse them on their real costs to do that.
Yeah, and that's all I was saying, it just seems, just saying reasonable expenses, well, is it reasonable to me, to you,
Yeah, the board doesn't get free MacBooks and cell phones and Wi-Fi, right?
If you're gonna have an attorney review this, just have them look at this section. And then when it comes to attorneys, you can negotiate anything. Like I had someone and I said, can you do this in an hour for your $260? And he did it. Well, it's not his. On a separate issue, I had an attorney look at something and I negotiated with them for a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time. But in this indemnification, it is legal fees. You're right. So just have the attorney write it up. That's the intent.
Comments or questions? Thanks again for everybody that just came out, especially those who.
I'll take it, please.
I just have a suggestion, given that there are some of you that have some work in the area with the 501c type stuff, is there somebody that wants to give us a hand with that? I guess that's a simple question, but it's good that obviously none of us have a whole lot of experience in that, if one.
That's a boring thing. I've actually never started one, like that.
It
join us.